Acapulco, Mexico. This is Anarchast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I've got a returning guest coming on. I had him on in 2014. It's Gregory Sams coming in from London, England again. The last time I had him on, he had just written a book called The State is Out of Date, obvious perfect book to talk about on Anarchast. But he's moved on since then and written about some much more esoteric sort of things, much more supernatural sort of things, thinking about more of life itself, you could say. And that's actually something I've done myself too. So we're maybe along the same wavelength in some ways. And it's kind of funny because I've gotten into so many different things. We're going to talk about this stuff all during this episode about what I've gotten into and all, what is life and what's actually going on. And one of the things, I've done literally hundreds of things. One of them is sun gazing. Someone said, hey, when you get up in the morning, go and just gaze at the sun. So actually, I've been taking these walks. I've been doing all kinds of stuff. I've been fasting, everything you can imagine, trying to figure out what's going on, trying to feel better, trying to get over some depression, which actually the fasting's done amazing stuff, and all kinds of things, including possibly even the sun gazing. So even this morning, I went for a long walk up the mountain. I just found this new trail all the way up this mountain in Acapulco, which was kind of cool. And the sun started coming up, and I sat on a rock and did some grounding or earthing, as people call it. That's another thing I've been doing, and started gazing at the sun. I don't know if it's doing much for me or not. I've just started doing it, but Gregory's into that kind of stuff. So when I saw that, and then I saw he had just finished a new book called Son of God, and I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. And as soon as I started reading it, I was like, this is all the questions and all the stuff I've been wondering about. So we're totally on the same wavelength. So Gregory, it's great to see you again and talk to you.
Yeah, it's great to be back, Jeff. I'm pleased to see you've done some personal development change since we last spoke.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people are. This seems to be sort of a progression. I think a lot of us anarchists, as you kind of realize how bad the government is and just how evil and nefarious and how it's just, there's nothing good about it. There's just absolutely nothing good about it. And how we've been trained our whole lives that it is good and we need it and all that kind of stuff. I think once you realize that and you start, not attacking the government, but saying, yeah, we don't need the government, that sort of thing, become more of an anarchist, you start to realize there's other things about life that isn't exactly what we've been told and isn't, that's really the point of everything I've learned so far is everything I've been told is a lie. That's basically where I'm at. I totally agree with George Carlin with the, whatever the government or the media tells me, I don't believe it. Like that's what Carlin said that. And I used to laugh at it because I knew it was true, but I didn't know how true it was. And I think everything we've been told basically is a lie. That's basically where I'm at right now. So tell us about this book and how you sort of, we're going to get into what the book's all about, but like what made you even start writing this book?
Well, I had an experience in 1966 in Berkeley, California, where when I recognized, I actually, without knowing about sun gazing as a practice, I stared into the sun for about 20 minutes or so, and recognized that it was a two-way exchange. I wasn't staring at an accidental light bulb in the sky. I was staring at something awesome and conscious. And that was a very firm realization. And then things caught up with me in my life. I got involved in natural organic foods, sold those for 15 years or more, then created the world's first veggie burger, sold that for 8 years, then sold the company. Then wrote a book I opened a shop devoted to chaos theory, wrote the book on the state. And when it came time in 2000 to write another book, I thought, hey, what about this idea I've had since I was 17 years old? Maybe now is the time to come out about this, because I mentioned it now and again over the decades, and people just looked at me, not like I was crazy. People had a lot of respect for me, but it was just a complete blank. People didn't know what I was talking about, why I was saying this, and they just let it pass. So I thought, yeah, let's start a book about it. And that's really what triggered the book. And what was amazing was the recognition, as I studied the science, of how obvious this was. And by the time I'd finished writing the book, what amazed me most wasn't the implications of stellar consciousness, but the fact that the solar scientists and cosmologists who have all the evidence supporting this at their fingertips can't break through the taboo that the church put upon them in all those centuries ago, in the 4th century, when the Christian church became the dominant religion of the Roman Empire. So they've been burning people for centuries, and even 100 years ago, speaking about anarchast and anarchy, it was governments that enforced the papal rule and theology, really. And anybody who sort of said, I'm a sun worshiper 100 or 150 years ago, or possibly even less, would have been, they lost their job, their reputation. In some places you go to jail. It was serious stuff. It was blasphemy. It was the worst sin you could commit. So I think there's a window now where you can do this. I don't know if fundamentalists take over our government, then we'll be back to a situation where you could be burned for writing a book like this. So I'm jumping into this gap and trying to get people to realize something that was common knowledge to all of humanity before Christianity came along. Wherever you went, cultures recognized the sun as a deity. They still do in India and Japan. So that's really the purpose of the book.
Yeah, up until a few years ago, I called myself agnostic. I didn't. I never really thought about much. For whatever reason, I just didn't think too deeply about what life was. Is there a God? Is there not a God? Is there many gods? What happens after life? All that kind of stuff. I kind of just put that off and just decided to live my life or whatever. And it was just a couple years ago, and everything changed for me, and I started just delving into all this kind of stuff, and it's been fascinating, and it's still to this day fascinating. It's been unbelievable, the amount of interesting things that I've been sort of discovering, not only about the world, but about myself, about reality and everything. It's been quite amazing. But I was very agnostic. I never called myself atheist. I don't really understand atheists. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Even the Big Bang Theory, which is science, scientism, obviously, these people are like, oh, I believe in science, so I'm an atheist. It's like, okay, so what do you believe? They're like, well, there was nothing billions of years ago. There was absolutely nothing. And then it all blew up, and all of a sudden there was everything. It's like, well, that's a religion, basically, your scientism. This whole atheist thing, it makes absolutely no sense to me. I guess to some people makes some sense or whatever, but that never made any sense to me. But I was just always agnostic, and I guess you could still say I am. I'm still searching. And one of the paths I went down was I read the Bible, and I'm like, okay, there's a lot of good stuff in here. This is pretty interesting stuff, and especially a lot of the revelations and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah, a lot of that stuff's actually happening and all that kind of stuff. So I started looking at that, but I'm like, well, who changed the Bible? Why is this called King James Bible? Why did this king change the Bible? And then I'm like, well, what other books? Why aren't these books in the, just questions after questions after questions. And what you realize is everything we've been told has been just totally, manipulated and changed by people over time.
Yeah, well, you mentioned atheism. It's interesting. A couple of people have reviewed my book and said here's a God for atheists, because Richard Dawkins, the God delusion. Well, he's dealing with Christianity or the Abrahamic three religions, whereas the sun is not a delusion; it's definitely up there. We're pretty sure of that. And whether you choose to worship it or not, it's clearly there. And my book, I think, makes it pretty clear that it's a living entity. There's just so much amazing specific stuff going on between the sun and planets, between the sun and other stars, between one galaxy and another, that is unaccountable for. And stars, they don't behave like accidental light bulbs in the sky, just responding to the laws of physics. And they have to make these weird corrections in science, like this dark matter. I mean, that makes me think of the luminiferous ether that scientists were trying to pin down for over a century, because they thought something has to transmit light. What transmits light? And they created this imaginary luminiferous ether, which they finally gave up on in the beginning of the 20th century. But now they're looking for dark matter, which it's not anything. It's the answer. It's a name given to the answer of a conundrum that hasn't yet been solved, which is why don't stars behave like dumb balls of gas? And it's simply because the answer is because they're not dumb balls of gas. But science can't take that on because they've been living with this religious taboo for so damn long. They think it's science, but there's nothing about the scientific method that underlies their dismissal of consciousness anywhere outside the human brain. I mean, it's only very recently that some scientists are going out on a limb and saying, yes, monkeys, orangutans, dolphins are self-aware. They're conscious living beings. That's a new recognition. At some point, they're going to extend that throughout the animal kingdom. At some point, they'll recognize that 3,000-year-old redwood trees, there's an element of consciousness there, and in an algae floating around in the pond. Then maybe they'll make it to what they would call inanimate objects, such as the sun, such as weather systems, oceans, things that animistic ancient cultures, animism was the basis of all ancient religion. And they recognized that consciousness actually extends throughout everything. It's everywhere, and it manifests in different ways in human beings and trees and stars, but it's out there. And that's probably why a lot of scientists don't believe in consciousness. They think it's an illusion. There's no such thing as free will. And everything we do, including this conversation, me holding this pencil up and tapping my head with it, was all predicated by the arrangement of particles at the Big Bang. And that's a really strong scientific belief. And I think they hold on to it because if they let go of it, they're going to have to extend the brief of consciousness to everything. And they just don't want to do that.
Yeah, what I've found is science, as we know it today, as is promoted, is a joke. It's an absolute joke. We have Bill Nye, the science guy. I call him Bill, the government shill guy. That's who they're promoting as a science guy, and he's just promoting government stuff. That's not even science. And then even getting into space-related stuff, you have NASA. I don't believe a thing they put out. They never went to the moon 50 years ago. There's no way they did. So a lot of the stuff that people think of as science, and then you brought up, they don't even go near consciousness because that, they just can't, whatever. But, that's the important questions in my mind. I don't care all that much if you can, measure the distance between two things or whatever the science guys want to say. And, of course, some science is good, right? Any sort of real science is fine. It's great. But most of the stuff is just BS, like you said. Like they're just trying to prove their stupid religion of the Big Bang and evolution and all this stuff, which is just, absolutely unbelievable and ridiculous. But they just continue to try to prove it through their own stupid sort of stuff, when the real important stuff might be right in front of our eyes, right? With things like the sun. Like, what do you see when you wake up every day? You see, then why do you live? Well, without that sun, you wouldn't live. And so tell us a bit more about why you think the sun is let me just say one more thing. I know I hang out with a lot of hippies now, what you call hippies, but they're kind of like they're way better than the hippies that you kind of knew in the 60s, in my opinion. They're really smart. They really know a lot of stuff, and they talk about everything is consciousness, and they say, the trees have consciousness, and you can even that movie Avatar, I think, had a lot of truth in it, as did the movie Matrix, in my opinion. But let's talk about the sun. Why do you think that? Let's talk more a bit about what you talk about in the book.
Why I think it's conscious is because that's a dumb answer, because it's obvious. Once you actually tune into it, and I'm also somebody who's tuned into the earth, the planet we live on. I've been eating natural and organic foods since 1967.
And that helps a lot, by the way. I just want to drop that. I've been into fasting, and I've actually gone beyond vegan now. I'm basically a fruitarian. Because what I realized as I was doing meditation over the last few years is the more clean I can get my body, the more I can communicate or connect, as you were saying, with things like the earth or, things like that. So you brought up that you've been organic and all that stuff. I think that helps you to connect more.
Yeah, you're in tune with the world around you when you're eating stuff that bears some resemblance to what was growing out of what was created out of sunlight, air, and water some weeks or months or days before. And I'm in terms of if you describe Fruitarian properly, I'm a Fruitarian in terms I focus on the fruits of the earth, which is seeds. So cereals and beans and oil seeds and fruits, and there's so many different food products which are actually seeds. So you're not actually killing anything, you're not pulling anything up or cutting anything down. You can eat 100 seeds and plant one, and the plant is winning. It's doing very well in life. So yeah, just that anyway. That grounding in my own body made me more able to tune in to something completely different. And of course, in the 60s, LSD was quite a driving factor there, and that opens your head up to things that you might never have considered before, whether it was looking within. I mean, before the 60s, looking within was stupid. You need a, what do you mean looking within? It was just a dumb concept, or emptying the mind. But people started doing this sort of stuff and meditating and doing yoga and tuning in and eating natural food. So, but beyond the instinctive awareness, I didn't do anything about it, as I say, until I started writing the book. And then I just saw everything I researched supported the idea. I mean, the sun, some people just think it's an accidental light bulb, but there's 7 distinct different layers to it. They're all performing different functions. Some of the ones in the visible part of the sun, because there's 3 invisible layers, but in the visible layers, they rotate around each other at different speeds. It's an organism. And there was something NASA discovered. I know you don't like NASA, but I've got a great respect for scientists. And the way they can determine stuff, but their conclusions are always in a framework of what's acceptable status quo, because they don't want to lose their funding or their positions in universities by saying weird shit. But NASA discovered, after I wrote the book, what they call a magnetic portal, which connects Earth to the sun. And it's a magnetic portal. They've got 4 satellites that can detect this, because invisible electromagnetic fields are hard to detect. But it comes off of the Earth. It's the diameter of Earth. And there's another part of the portal that comes out of the sun's corona. And every 8 minutes, these 2 sections join together, and tons of high energy particles are transmitted back and forth between sun and earth. Now, how do you explain that as some accidental phenomenon? Now, I don't know what exactly is going on right there, but there's some sort of communication, direction, feedback. There's something going on there, and they've spotted connections like this, these magnetic portals connecting galaxies to galaxies. And I have little doubt that these portals exist connecting our star to other stars in this galaxy, as well as the rest of our planets. It's all joined up, and that's and we also find out that stars live in communities. They're not just randomly scattered throughout the galaxy. They live in communities of a few hundred, a few thousand, or 5 or 10 million, kind of like we live in villages, towns, and cities, because they like to be together for communication. They're part. Most stars have a partner. They don't just they're binary system. It's called. You could also call it a couple. And this 2 stars, sometimes 3, will travel together through the galaxy, and they'll spin around each other, sometimes like figure skaters. They just, they don't behave like accidental balls of gas. And that was a remarkable thing that I discovered writing the book. I mean, there's only really one chapter that focuses on the sun, because once you have that on board, you have to look at galaxies, at the rest of the universe, at light itself. Because our star, it might be a divine, most important thing in our life, but it's just an average star amongst billions of stars in the galaxy. But it is our local transmitter of the life force and the light, which is what we're blessed with every day.
Yeah, it's so interesting. There's so many theories about, what this universe is, what this world is. I'm into all, I read, I look into everything. I don't believe anything we've been told. And speaking of that, I think you pointed out earlier, maybe it was before we started this interview, you were saying that the church really went after people. I think you did say it in this interview, the church really went after people who even talked about the sun being any sort of conscious thing or anything to worship or anything like that. And one thing I found out, or I looked into the church, like that is one of the most evil sort of institutions around. And just like everything, like, the Pope, he's supposed to be the best guy and he's the most connected guy. It's like, no, that guy is like the most evil guy pretty much. Actually, he's probably got more evil people behind him. But anyway, the whole point is just, why would the church really attack this ideology? That's really interesting to think about, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it was the competition, basically. This was worshiping the sun was quite common in the world, and this was a huge threat to Christianity because God created the sun just to give us some light, and it's still it's a dumb thing, and God it was the opposition. And when they had the Roman Empire behind them, they crushed it savagely. And as you know, there were various interpretations of Christianity, which were standardized at the Council of Nicaea. They said, okay, all these other gospels, all these other stories, they're out. This is the story. We're all going to agree on it. Anybody who strays from this, Christian, pagan, whatever, is done for. And lots of Christians were massacred because they had a different interpretation of what Jesus said. And you had the Cathars in the south of France and north of Spain who were wiped out. It was one of the first inquisitions was against the Cathars, who were Christians. And, tens, possibly hundreds of thousands of them were killed. And there was a famous battle, the siege of the city of Béziers in the south of France, where these Cathars got along perfectly well with Catholics in this city of 30,000. And they were happy with each other's religion, interpretations of Christianity, but the Pope wasn't. And when they finally broke the siege and went in to take Béziers, the Crusaders asked the papal legate, how do we tell between the Catholics and the Cathars when we get in there? And the papal legate said, kill them all. God will know his own. Just horrific stuff went down. And when they ran out of Cathars to kill, they said, well, what do we do now? So they said, let's create this thing called the Inquisition, and we'll go for closet Christians in Spain. And that began another few centuries of torture, murder, and appalling behavior by the church. And I will say, though, a lot of people do get benefit from the church if there's some sort of moral guidance there's some sort of education, but they also very much brought about the Dark Ages when they took command of the Roman Empire and just killed all the pagan learning. Everything that wasn't in the Bible was pagan. So when the Library of Alexandria was destroyed and the 13 mystery schools were destroyed, people and knowledge and books were gone forever. There was probably a whole room in the Library of Alexandria telling us how to build pyramids. And, we've been debating it ever since because nobody knows these days. It was a shocking loss of knowledge.
Yeah, that's another thing, just all the hidden knowledge. They say even the Vatican has so many things that they've hidden, they won't let anyone see. It's just, one thing that I always said about sort of religion, like human religion, I'm very spiritual now, but religion is a whole different thing. To me, that's man-made. To me, like the church doesn't offer God, they sell God. They make money off God. And of course, the church is one of the richest entities in the world by far. The Pope sits there on his gold throne telling you to give to the poor and all that, but first you got to give him some money and whatever. It's all man-made. But what is your take on things like religion and spirituality?
Well, I think it's, in the West at least, if somebody was charting it, I think that the fastest growing religion on the planet is spiritual but not religious. Mm-hmm. Now, those two words are meant to be synonyms. But people have made a differentiation between being spiritual and subscribing to one or other of the organized religions. And it's a very important difference, because spiritual is just being in touch with something other than the physicality of our world. And there are lots of books out there that can help you take that further, and meditation techniques that can help you take that further, without saying, this is how you have to grow your hair, this is what you can eat, this is what direction you have to face when you pray, this is you don't have to go into a church and be surrounded by walls and shut your eyes and put your head down to contact the divine. It's all around us. And cultivating your own spirituality takes you there. You don't necessarily need advice, guidance, techniques are all great, but you don't need a code, a religious dogma. And I discovered Zoroastrianism, which is one of the oldest religions, possibly the oldest religion on the planet, and the first one to recognize a universal God, which was light. Light itself was their ultimate deity. And their creed, the entire Zoroastrian creed, is summed up in 6 words. And those are good thoughts, good words, good deeds. And it's a very moral religion. I don't know if you've studied Cyrus the Great at all, but many people he conquered were happy to have him conquer them, because it was complete freedom of religion, absolute banning of any sort of slavery. The soldiers, the rulers were not allowed to disrespect common people. I mean, it was a very morally high Persian Empire that Cyrus the Great created, but it tracks back to recognizing light as the ultimate deity and recognizing the qualities of goodness, inspiration, spirituality, love come with light. And I always point out we have that in our own language. We have a linguistic understanding when we talk about shedding light on the subject and seeing the light and following a guiding light and pursuing enlightenment and being delighted by things. We associate light with lots of spiritual, positive, intelligent features. And when you stare into the sun, I mean, I don't know if you get any kind of ideas coming into your head when you're sungazing, but it's a fairly inspirational process. And again, light is the ultimate mystery of quantum physics. And I gave a talk. I give a talk a few times, which was called "Seeing the Light Through Ancient Eyes." And when you look at the Zoroastrian understanding of light and what Zoroaster said about light, he could be sitting down with today's top quantum physicists and they have a great conversation because they're on absolutely the same plane. Zoroastrian adds spiritual dimensions to it, but on the physicality and the nature of light, Zoroastrian had it long before quantum physics, which was quite remarkable.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, well, I'm finding most science and stuff today is pretty medieval. It's pretty, like, half of it's wrong. I'm not talking about, like, measuring stuff and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about theories on, the Big Bang, for example, and even then things like physics, like light. I failed physics in high school, but that's probably a good thing, and I barely went to high school, and that's probably a good thing. But I've always wondered about that too. Like, what is light? Like, how do you even quantify what that is? And you get into more of the spiritual aspects, and people always say, well, all it takes to talking about the spiritual aspects of things, all it takes, if you go into a room and it's just full of darkness, all it takes is one candle and the entire room is lit. So that's how you can get rid of darkness. And, all these sort of ways of looking at things, it's all fascinating and very interesting. And one of the things that struck me a little bit, especially about the title of your book, Son of God, is I've been looking into the meaning of words and why we use certain words and things like that. And that struck me a while ago, was they always call Jesus the Son of God, and we also call that the Son. Is there any relation to that? Have you looked into that, or is that just pure coincidence to use that for the name of the book?
There are lots of, quite a few people have outlined how Jesus Christ and the legend and of what he did and what he represented is based upon previous religions, previous heroes and sons of God. It's just about everything in his so-called history is borrowed from other people. Some maintain that he didn't even exist. Some maintain that he survived the crucifixion, went on to Kashmir, and continued preaching till a ripe old age. And there's a lot of evidence to support that. But then other people, have evidence supporting that he never even lived, and there's virtually no mention of him in ancient chronicles of the time. But he's maybe he existed. But he supplanted, Christianity supplanted the Son, and so many Christian churches are built over old temples. It's I've never been able to relate the New Testament and Jesus Christ to the Old Testament anyway. They just seem like two opposite extremes of each other. I found the Old Testament I never read it. I was fortunate. You didn't study physics, do well in physics. I was okay there, but I never, bless my parents, they never took me to church. They never instilled any religion in me, except, I had to be baptized because my father's 5 sisters and 3 brothers, particularly his 5 sisters, and you got to get your child baptized, okay. So I don't remember it, but I'm told about it. I was taken into the church in Bridgeville, Pennsylvania, and as they were taking my shoes off and dipping me in water or whatever shit they were doing, I was shouting out, "I don't want to go to bed. I don't want to go to bed." that was my baptism. I still don't like going to bed. I like staying up late. But so I was spared all of that, and it really made it much easier for me to actually look into this Son and look at the old religions. There's a whole chapter in my book on religion, where I just sort of do a run through of the world's different religions, and that was the hardest and the least fun chapter to write, because I had to do lots and lots of research, and I found out completely opposing information on whether the Gospels and the Bible contradict each other, or whether it was totally different dates for when the Buddha and various people were born and died. It's not even an agreed thing. So, and I've forgotten your question now. Did I answer it?
I don't remember the question. Oh, something about the Son of God. If you had ever tied that to Jesus, how they call it the Son of God. I think you basically answered that question.
Yeah, right at the beginning there.
Yeah, so talking about sungazing, talking about the sun in general, before we get into that, I've always found that if society, if the government, if the media, if everybody is telling you not to do something, you should look into it, because, like I said, everything's a lie. And that's something I noticed years ago. And I'm not saying I'm a sun worshiper or anything. I haven't even fully read your book yet. I wanted to talk to you because I just got into sun gazing and saw what you were writing about. And I'm also into spirituality and all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to talk to to you, but what I've noticed years ago was, man, like they've got everything wrong about the sun. Like we need the sun, in my opinion. I spend like a half hour to an hour every day in the sun. I'm never healthier than when I'm in the sun. If I'm not in the sun, I'm sick. But they tell you stay out of the sun. Then you go to Japan, everyone's got like their umbrellas so the sun doesn't touch their skin. And then you have people in our society, they're like, well, watch out for skin cancer. You're going to get skin cancer from the sun. So put all these dangerous chemicals all over your skin, which is your biggest organ, which just like, that's like as bad as you can do is to put that sunscreen stuff on your skin to protect yourself from the sun. It's like, and then you go into how the church used to like burn people for talking about how they thought maybe the sun had consciousness or whatever. So when you have all of these things fighting against the sun, to me, there's something to it.
Well, you've just told me you are a sun worshiper. You said you're not yet, but if you go back to the roots of worship, the word worship, it means to absorb the energies, absorb the qualities of that which you're worshiping. So you're sort of connecting with it, taking something from it, maybe giving something to it. And when you sun gaze, when you actually sit out in the sun in a conscious sense and just, enjoy those rays, that's the simplest form of worship there is to make that connection. And when you're consciously doing it, it's just that much more powerful. And it's the sun. It does make us feel good. You see a sunny day, a lovely sunny day. It lifts our spirits. Even those people who are frightened of the sun and put shit all over their body because of it. It's still, hey, it's a nice sunny day. And yet, how many people think, why does the sun lift our spirits? Why is it so nice when it's a bright sunny day? And it's because that's what we are. The light coming out of our eyes is recycled sunlight, recycled into the life of a human being, because that's the energy we take from food, is the energy of the sunlight that's been stored in it. When you sit around a campfire with a bunch of people, there's that magic thing about sitting around a fire, which people have been doing for thousands of years. That's secondhand sun gazing. When you're looking at the fire, you don't have to squint. You don't have to do it just when the fire's been lit and just before it goes out. You can look at it all the time, which is great. But that's all sun being recycled into different forms of light. And photosynthesis, it means made by light, because just about every tree, plant, food, herb, shrub on this planet is made out of three basic ingredients, which is water, air, and sunlight. That's it. And there's just, what comes out of the ground is the equivalent of the vitamins and minerals we take as a minuscule, 2 or 3% of our diet. Because otherwise, obviously, forests would be sunk into the ground after a century or two. They just sink and sink and sink because they sucked everything out, but they don't. It's water, air, and sunlight. And photosynthesis quite rightly means made by light, because what do we do with water and air? We make fizzy drinks out of it. The sun makes everything that's living on this planet, which is quite remarkable.
Yeah, one of the other things that one of my sort of hippie friends said, yeah, you should sun gaze, and I'm open to anything and everything, so I tried it. One of the things that I noticed, though, just doing a few Google searches, is so many warnings about don't do it, you're going to go blind, another sort of thing. So I was a little careful because I'm like, I don't want to go blind. So I read that you should do it sort of, in the morning when it just comes up, or at night when it's just going down or whatever. But tell us a little bit about, just the mechanics of sun gazing. So can you do it in the daytime, or is that actually dangerous? And that's also interesting. That's one thing I remember thinking when I was a kid. I was like, if that sun is a burning ball of fire, which I don't think it is, I don't believe anything NASA says. The scientists are idiots. But even if it was, how is it like so bright if it's supposedly 90 million miles away, which I don't think it is anyway. But if it is, how is it so bright that it will burn our eyes? That's unbelievable. Literally unbelievable. But it actually can, which is kind of, is that true? Like if you actually stare at it at midday, will you go blind?
Why should it be unbelievable? But it's massive. I mean, it's miraculous that the sun, it holds all these planets in orbit. It illuminates us, and you don't go blind. I mean, I don't advise it. If you should never need to squint when you're looking at the sun. If you need to squint, it's too high up in the sky or it's not far enough down. But I sun gaze during the day, sometimes through thin cloud. I can see a really clear image of the solar disk behind that cloud. Through trees, I've sun gazed. Sometimes I sun gaze the reflection in a lake. Even there's a puddle in my part of my, the concrete part of my back garden that it often doesn't drain out. Sometimes I sun gaze in that, off of windows there. As long as you're not squinting or, feeling any natural aversion to it, that's a good time to sun gaze. But I know J.W. Turner, the famous English landscape artist, was known as the painter of light, because he would have these huge parts of his canvas. I don't know if you're aware of his work, but you should check it out if you're not. He's got the most wonderful depictions of the sun and of light, and it's a very hard thing for artists to portray. He used to sun gaze. There was no word for it. And his friends would come up to him, because any old time of day, he'd be staring into the sun for half an hour or more, studying light. And his eyes had adapted to it. And his friends would say, you can't do that. You're gonna damage yourself. He said, listen, to me, staring at the sun is like to you staring at a candle. That was how used to it he was. And he didn't go blind. He kept on painting through to his last days. So, it's something to be cautious with for sure, but, your own body tells you to be cautious, because, you have to squint and you shouldn't be squinting. So, there's various ways to do it, but through mirrors and through clouds is also, because in London, I can't see the setting or the rising sun where I am.
Yeah, or rarely on any day, really, with all the rain.
Well, no, it's not the rain, but it's. I've got houses around me. And a lot of people living in cities can't see a horizon, and that's what you need. You see it coming over the sea in Acapulco, I guess, coming out of the ocean. That's some of my most brilliant sunrises in my life have been rising out of the ocean, but I can count them on both hands. So I have to make do with what I can.
So when you sun gaze, is it sort of like a form of meditation to some extent? And how long do you do it for?
I don't actually clock myself.
I'm just wondering if it's like 30 seconds or 30 minutes, something.
Either or both. I've done 30 minutes. I've done 30 seconds. It depends how high the sun is. In London, we're quite north. So in the winter and early spring and late autumn, the sun rides very low on the horizon. So sometimes there'll be an hour or two before sunset when I could stare straight at it. So yeah, I do it when I can, but it's I don't necessarily do it every day. Well, we don't get the sun every day anyway. But then people, I'm not going to get any disclaimers here, but people can look it up and read all the warnings and stuff before they do it. But some people say you got to start with 30 seconds and build up to 5, 10, 20 minutes so as your eyes adjust. But certainly people who've been wearing sunglasses all their life, going to take them a long time to get over it because their eyes aren't used to it.
Yeah, I heard something about wearing sunglasses is not a good idea from some hippie somewhere. I forgot about that. But that makes sense with the sun and how it has so many healing qualities. And even, as you were saying, just gazing into it can be sort of a spiritual experience, so to speak.
But there are so many things that sunlight is good for. And quite a few doctors and scientists, the more enlightened ones, have pointed this out, that aside from vitamin D and bones and osteoporosis, there are so many things that it heals. Just having sunlight hit your skin that far outweigh the few cases, the cases of skin cancer. And I don't know how, I suspect that wearing sunglasses has probably contributory cause of skin cancer, because your skin produces melatonin to, or is it melanin? I always get them mixed up, to adapt to the sunlight. And that's what makes you brown nicely instead of going bright red. And a lot of that detection, I reckon, is going to be going in through the eyes. Your eyes say, right, the light's like this, the body's got to produce stuff in the blood and put it in the skin that's going to work, not protect us from the sun, that's going to work with it, that's going to take the sunlight in and do good stuff with it. And you put sunglasses on, that system is disabled to some degree.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. And also I remember some other people, including Sasha Daygame, was telling me all about light and how important it is. For example, they were saying when you get up in the morning, look at the sun, because it kind of triggers your body to realize it's daytime, because that's, what we're used to through our DNA or whatever you want to say, through just our experience. And as well, Sasha Daygame was trying to get me to wear these like orange glasses at night, or even during the day when I'm in like fluorescent lighting or in fake lighting, like not sunlight, that it's actually quite bad for you. So people are working all day. They'll be working in an office. The sun's out all day, but they close the blinds and they're working under these fluorescent lights, which is a really bad form of light, and that actually makes them quite sick as well. So like you said, with sunglasses, that's also throwing you off. So all these things that we're kind of doing and told to do, put on this sunscreen, and it seems to be all wrong, right?
That's right. It's all wrong.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I don't know how long we should keep this conversation going. It's very interesting. Is there any part of the book or anything that we haven't talked about that we haven't got into that you want to get into?
Well, the chapter on light itself just completely blew my mind. And especially as I realized the nature of it. You talked about the Big Bang, and I think it's quite hilarious how the cosmologists just rewind the clock backwards at the same pace to a point, 13.7 billion years ago when a miracle happened. I mean, there's no denying if they're saying suddenly, all this stuff came out of nothing, that's a miracle. And if they're it's just, they don't do miracles. They say, but just give us one miracle and we'll explain everything else, which is something that Rupert Sheldrake likes to put out there. And but if you look at the nature of light, it has no substance. And because it has no substance, it doesn't have to be any place. It doesn't need a space in which to exist. And this is one of the things that is impossible to get our heads around, because of course we are space oriented. The other aspect of it, it doesn't have any time, because when you travel at the speed of light, time slows down to nothing. And then if you go beyond the speed of light, time goes backwards. So you would travel backwards in time if it were possible to go faster than the speed of light. That Interstellar movie, I think, played on that. But if you take something that doesn't need a place to be and that exists outside of time, it could have existed before the universe. There could have been energy before a universe existed. So I'm suggesting, the Big Bang, there was a nuclear explosion is matter turning into energy. That's what we have. That's the biggest explosion we have when you turn matter to energy. Well, if energy is coming to matter, and if you had this sort of energy condensing into the universe, then maybe there's a big whoosh. But to me, that is not a miracle required. It's something that is technically possible. I know it's a complete head screw up to try and even imagine it, but that's why Richard Feynman says anybody who says they understand quantum physics hasn't studied it nearly enough, because it is beyond comprehension what light does. And I mean, how do we adjust to the fact that, in our scale, it takes 9 minutes, 8 or 9 minutes for light to travel from the sun to Earth. But from the point of view of the light, it arrives the very same instant that it left the sun, or that it left Sirius 8.5 light years ago. When it gets to the back of your eyeball, that light has traveled all the way from Sirius. But as far as the light's concerned, it got there instantly. It doesn't lose any energy in that journey. It arrives as exactly the same photon that left Sirius all those trillions of miles away. I don't know. Can you get your head around that? No, you can't, obviously.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of things about life you can't get your head around. Time and space are definitely one of them. And what created it all that kind of stuff. So I'm glad you put out this book. I'm glad you did the research, and very interesting stuff. I've just started reading it, but I plan to finish it. I'm reading so many books right now.
I know the phenomenon.
Yeah, I actually read 3 books the last couple of days, all on fasting. That's been my latest thing. I've been really into fasting lately. I found that has really... It's a lot, again, everything they say about it is wrong. Everything the media and the government tells you is wrong. It's actually been one of the best things I've done in a long time. So I've been researching that.
Again, that's people are recognizing that the body is intelligent. I've been talking about the sun, but it's a new recognition that the body is intelligent. And, when you give the body a break from all that processing and stuff, it's amazing what it can do in terms of healing itself, repairing, sorting stuff out like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I've been finding out, and so excited to find out. All this stuff it's amazing. I don't know why people go to school or watch television programming. It's like, just get on the internet and just like start looking into all this stuff. Like, it's all out there. It's kind of funny, all these commies out there want their free school. It's like the internet. It's right there. It's free. It's basically free. They all got their iPhones from their parents anyway. So, but yeah, all this stuff is fascinating. So I was quite interested to see that you wrote that book, because I thought I had you kind of pigeonholed in a certain way, but to see you come out that way is kind of cool. I kind of like people like that. They have different aspects to themselves. So I really recommend it. We'll have the links to Gregory's book down below. And do you want to mention any websites or URLs where people could find more info?
Yeah, my website, gregorysams.com. That's SAMS. That's got a bit about my previous history, a fractal gallery, some stuff I've written, link to my blog, and a bit about both books. And it's got quite a few reviews on the books and links to George Carlin did a great thing on sun worship, which I've got a link to all in there. But it says gregorysams.com. That'll do it.
That's great. We'll have those links down below. And yeah, George Carlin's got a lot of great quotes and stuff. Yeah, it's too bad that he's gone now, but we still have him on YouTube, so that's good. So yeah, we'll have all those links down below. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, share down below. A lot of interesting information, a lot of interesting topics. And that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
From Acapulco, Mexico, this is Anarchast.